or, or even if you are just, curious about engineering, or you want to get to know some students, please do join us for that. So that's next Wednesday from 12 to 1. Fabulous, fabulous group of folks that are going to be joining us for that. And then finally, there is a Rotman Instagram account. So Rotman Memba is the name of our Instagram account, and we would love it if you could follow us. We do have a lot of engaging content there as well. So, and we are going to be putting more and more emphasis on that account over the summer. All right, it's 12:01. So I do realize that is hopefully there are some more people joining us. Without further ado, what I would like to do now is to invite our host, or our guest rather, for the AdmitMaster GMAT session. Sergey, who is a senior trainer at AdmitMaster, has a wonderful hour planned for you. And so without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to him. Welcome, Sergey.
Thank you so much again. Thank you very much for having me. And ladies and gentlemen, I'm so excited that you've decided to come here, because it's summertime and the weather is nice outside, and yet you decided to spend an hour during lunchtime learning about the GMAT and how to get into your dream business school. So please feel free to have a bite while we are talking. But what I would also like you to do is grab a pen and paper, because I'm going to give you some challenges to complete today, so that you can get a feel of what it's like to do the GMAT. I want to teach you some strategies today. I also would like to give you some ideas of how you can prepare, so that if you indeed would like to meet the deadline and get into the program, the Rotman Morning and Evening MBA program for this August, then you still potentially can meet that deadline. So ladies and gentlemen, let me know where you're coming from, and let me know how much of the GMAT studies have you done. Just please put them in the chat box. You can also use the Q&A box. I've noticed, okay, some people are from Toronto, haven't really started yet. Okay, well, I'm in Toronto as well. So ladies and gentlemen, let's get started. I'd like to throw you into a deep end a little. I'd like to show you a couple of GMAT questions, just so that you can get an idea of what it's like to do a GMAT question. And if at the first it will seem a little scary, don't worry. I am going to break things down for you, and you'll know exactly what to do when you see a question just like that. So here's the first question. The question says the ratio of pigs to chickens on a certain farm is 13 to 28. Then we add 15 pigs to the farm, and the ratio of pigs to chickens became now 4 to 7. What was the original total number of pigs and chickens on this farm? Here are the answer choices. Now, here's how most people are going to do this question. They'll say, okay, well, I remember something about ratios and something about equations in high school. In fact, this question is going to be classified as a linear equation question by the GMAT. And there are many different ways to deal with this question, but one of the ways is the classical textbook way of doing this question. In fact, this is what you probably learned in school. This is what you are going to see at the back of the book if you read the explanation from a GMAT prep book. Here's what you are going to see, and here's what you might still remember. So if you have a ratio, and the ratio is 13 to 28, essentially what this means is that you might have 13 pigs and 28 chickens, or you might have 130 pigs and 280 chickens. So you have some sort of a multiplier. And ladies and gentlemen, I've noticed that nobody's putting things in the chat box, so I've made sure that you can actually do that. But thanks so much for being creative and using the Q&A box. Appreciate it. Okay, wonderful. All right, so here's what we can do. So we have 13 N pigs essentially and 28 N chickens. And then we would add 15 pigs. Now we have 13 N plus 15. We have a new ratio, and we can then solve for N. Please let me know in the chat box. I've noticed a few people have already answered this question. Was this something that you've actually done? So we solve for N, yeah? I see a few people are actually telling me what is N. Yes, perfect. That means you're really good in math. Congratulations. If you find that N is equal to 5, of course, you will realize that there's 65 pigs, 140 chickens. And if you add these numbers together, you're going to get 205. Now, let me ask you this question. This may be a tricky question. Do you think that this is what the GMAT wants you to do on the day of the test? Let me know. What do you think? Is that what the GMAT wants you to do? Okay, some people are saying probably not. So here's, and I'm going to give you some insights, some very interesting insights, because not only I'm a GMAT instructor, but I also lead Admit Master here in Toronto, and we belong to a small group of test prep organizations that actually get invited to go and visit the GMAT headquarters every year. And I was just there last week. And one interesting thing is they told us a lot about how the exam is changing. And one of the things they said is one of the reasons why the exam is changing next year is because the exam has become a little more mathy than what the GMAT would want it to be. Many questions on the current version of the test could actually be solved using math. And traditionally, with the North American system of education, people are not particularly, maybe necessarily very strong in math. So the exam was somewhat fair to everyone. But now, as more and more international students are taking the GMAT, and only approximately 20% of people who take the GMAT now are from the United States, whereas about probably 20 years ago was close to 80%. Many people in other parts of the world are really good at doing this sort of a math. So what the GMATs would actually do is they will make the questions trickier in terms of math, so that it actually is going to be going forward a lot harder to do the questions using what we've just done. Just because, again, they don't want these people who are really good in math to have this huge advantage in the quant questions. So if you're really good in math, it might be a little bit of a bad news for you, but I'd like to show you a different way of doing this question. And this is the way that the GMAT probably wants you to focus on. And this is a way that you could totally handle even if you're not good in math or not as good in math. So let me show you what you could do. Let's work smart instead of working hard. So here's what we could do. Now, we could understand conceptually what's happening here, and we can use that conceptual understanding on a higher level to our advantage to be able to answer this question. Now, also remember, this is a multiple choice exam. And I always like to remind this to my students in class. I teach GMAT classes as well, that the answer, the correct answer, is always in front of you. You don't necessarily always need to solve the problem. You just have to find the answer. And the answer is right there. The 5 answer choices, one of them is correct. So let's try to focus on that a little bit more. Now, we were told that initially on this farm, we had 13 pigs and 28 chickens. That means for every 13 pigs, we would have 28 chickens. That means if we start with 13 pigs and 28 chickens, we start with 41 total domestic animals. And then let's say we want to increase the number of animals, we would add 13 more pigs, we would add 28 more chickens, and add more animals. So guess what? Based on this analysis, what we've just done, we already know that the number of animals on the farm originally, before we started adding new, had to be a multiple of 41, right? The number of pigs is a multiple of 13, the number of chickens is a multiple of 28, and the total number of animals, of pigs and chickens, is a multiple of 41. Well, remember, this is a multiple choice exam, right? So let me ask you this question. How many answer choices are multiples of 41? The numbers are pretty close. The difference between 200 and 220 is only 20. So obviously only one of them could be a multiple of 41. And it's not very hard to understand that this is number 205. 200 is approximately 40 times 5. So we know the multiplier is going to be around 5. Didn't really need to do all of these linear equations to figure that out. And now we know that 41 or 40 times 5 is 200, 1 times 5 is 205. The math is pretty easy, and we can answer this question literally in 30 seconds. Somebody is asking, please explain in detail. Okay, let me try again. So we have original number of animals on the farm was 13 pigs and 28 chickens. For every 13 pigs, we would have 28 chickens. Every time we would add 13 more pigs, we would add 28 more chickens. So the total number of pigs must be a multiple of 13. The total number of chickens must be a multiple of 28. So if we add 13 and 28, the total number of pigs and chickens together must be a multiple of 41, right? Must be divisible by 41. How many answer choices are divisible by 41? There's only one of them, and that's number 205. And that's what we can do in literally in 30 seconds. Notice that we haven't even used the fact that we've added 15 pigs and that the new ratio was 4:7. It wasn't actually that important. We've used the information that was given to us to our advantage to find the answer without necessarily solving a problem. Any questions, please let me know in the chat box. Hope this gave you a bit of a preview of what you want to focus on the GMAT. Now, of course, I'm going to tell you how you can actually get to this and how you could start seeing these things, because obviously that's not how most of us have been trained in high school. Our school, or most of the school systems aren't necessarily designed to help people learn how to think critically and think on a higher level. But this is sort of a skill that will be required for you to succeed in a very advanced degree, such as the MBA program. And certainly Rotman's a very competitive and very academically heavy program. So for you to be successful in the program, you want to make sure that you possess these skills. That's why preparing for the GMAT will be your opportunity to actually get ready for the MBA program, right? So please don't think of the GMAT just like a silly little exam that stands between you and the program. It is actually a way for you to make sure that you are ready for the program. So this was the problem-solving question. I'm going to show you some more questions as we go along as well, but I wanted to do one verbal reasoning question as well. So this is a question that is called critical reasoning. You have an argument. This particular argument was actually provided by an ethicist. So it's a person who studies ethics, some sort of a professor maybe at the university. And you have a question about this argument. I'm going to give you about 30 seconds or so to try to make sense of what's going on here. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I am not yet going to ask you to actually explain the role of that statement, because this is not really what most of us are focusing on. And it is something you're going to see in the answer choices that I'm going to show you in a moment. I just wanted to ask you a very simple question, just to help me understand if we can move forward. Can you please tell me, let me know in the chat box, over this time that I've given you, which was about 40 seconds, how many times have you read this passage? Just let me know. Do you read it once, twice, 3 times, 4 times, 5 times? Let me know. Twice, okay, twice. Some people only once, twice. Okay, most people, 5 or 6 times. Okay, that's perfect. All right, twice, yeah. And if you can please use the chat box, that would be great, just so that it will help me make things a little bit easier to make sure that I don't miss any of your questions. So if you have a question, please put it in a Q&A box, but for our quick answers here, please use the chat box if possible. Okay, so most of you have read it twice, which is great. Some people read it 5 to 6 times. Let me ask you this question, or 4 times, perfect. Let me ask you this question. On a scale of 0 to 10, how much would you say you understand this passage? 0 means I have no idea what's going on here. And 10 means, yeah, I'm pretty good. I know exactly what's happening here. And I can actually answer some questions. Okay, well, some people are with 0, but most people are kind of 7 or 8. Okay, great, perfect. Yeah, 4, 7. Okay, so most people are somewhere between kind of 4 to 5, but somewhere close to like 7 or 8. So now that you've read this 2 or 3 times, and now that we understand it relatively well, what I'd like to ask you to do is actually pick an answer. I'm going to show you the answer choices. I'm going to give you about 30 or 45 seconds. And please tell me, what do you think? Which of these answers correctly describes what role does this statement play? Here are the answer choices. And when you think you know what the answer is, please put it in the chat box. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we have a lot of people still haven't answered this question, but many people for A, B, C, we have D as well as E. So yeah, there are votes for every answer choice. Let's actually see. Okay, some people are kind of between several answer choices. So probably not the easiest question. In fact, let's go back to the question. Just like I mentioned, this is a passage that is an argument that's made by an ethicist. I don't know about you. I've never met a person by the profession of ethicist, but just like we said, probably some sort of a professor who studies ethics. Let me ask you a question. Please let me know in the chat box. You're trying to get into a prestigious business school such as Rotman. How much do you need to know about ethics? Let me know. Do you need to know a lot about ethics? A little, nothing? What do you think? Nafis is saying nothing. Definitely important, little. So I think you have to be ethical. I think that's important. But believe it or not, you don't have to be an expert in ethics, actually, right? So it's different between being ethical and knowing stuff about ethics. Because the question, and here's a bit of a backup for what I'm saying. Notice that the question didn't really ask us about ethics. That's what makes this test a little bit different. It simply asked us that statement in bold, for although it's true that blah, 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 plays which role in the argument. So we're not being asked about the content of the argument. We are being asked about the structure of the argument. This is very different from how we're used to studying. I'm going to give you some ideas of how you can potentially redesign your studies so that you could actually be very successful on this test, contrary to many other people who are not. So if we want to understand the structure, in order to answer the question, what was the role of this statement, we need to focus on very different things. Most people focus on things such as deserve to be praised for doing what's right. And then they try to understand what this really means. But what we really need to understand here is what these keywords mean. The author begins by saying it would be a mistake to say something. So somebody made a mistake. That means this person or these people are wrong. And obviously, the ethicist claims that he or she is right and needs to provide an explanation why he or she is right. So the explanation is what we call the evidence or the premise of the argument. The opinion is what we call the conclusion or a claim of the argument. So the essence begins by making a claim, these people are wrong, I'm right, and then provide some sort of a backup, some sort of support or evidence saying, yeah, even though this part is true, nevertheless, these people are still wrong. They probably misunderstood it, right? Now, let's see if we can actually use this analysis to answer the question. Remember, the question was about the part in bold. We've just determined the part in bold is supporting the author's claim that these people are wrong. And most specifically, the author does partially agree with these people. The author actually says that this particular statement is actually true. Yeah, but nevertheless, I still disagree with them. So let's now go to our answer choices and see which one will correctly describe that argument. When I do these questions in a live class, usually the most popular answer is C, and certainly there are quite a few people who answered C today. So C says it is a faulty claim. Now, there certainly was a faulty claim here, supposedly by these people who are wrong. But remember, the question wasn't about that claim. The question was about that part in the middle, the part in bold, that actually began with the words for although it is true. So if the author said, although it is true, how could that statement be faulty? That's why C definitely would not be the correct answer. Let's now look at D. D says it is according to the argument a commonly held opinion that is nevertheless false. Okay, I don't have to do any other analysis. The author says it's true. This answer choice says it's false, so I can stop. E, it reports an observation that the argument claims is false. I don't have to continue reading. I already know it's wrong. So now I'm down to two answer choices, A and B. And interestingly enough, when I'm down to two answer choices, obviously only one of them could be correct. So I could take a look at either one of them, the one that I think is going to be easier to analyze. If it's correct, that's great. If it's wrong, that's also great. Then it has to be the one that's remaining. So I want to be a little lazy, and I'm going to look at the one that's shorter. Let's look at A. A says it is a claim for which the argument attempts to provide justification. That means that part in the middle was the main claim of the argument. But we actually said it wasn't. The main claim was that these people are wrong. This was the support for that claim. So A wasn't the right answer. B was. And I've done this question for many years. And if you really ask me, what is this person trying to say about ethics? I'll say, honestly, I still don't understand that. Doesn't really matter, because the GMAT isn't about that. In fact, let me show you a quote from the organization that makes the test, the GMAT, the Graduate Management Admission Councils. They're the makers of the GMAT. Here's what they say. This quote is on MBA.com. It's also in the official guide. Just interestingly enough, most people miss that quote. And it very clearly defines what is the big difference between this test and most other tests. I don't know about you, but I've done a lot of tests that were knowledge-based. One of the most recent exams that I've done a few years ago was a project management professional. And to prepare for this exam, I needed to go through a book that was called the Project Management Body of Knowledge, PMBOK. And I had to go through this book because there was actually a body of knowledge to be a project management professional. I had to know the 5 phases of the project and the stakeholders and everybody else, right? I had to remember it. Yet on the GMAT, people come from different backgrounds. I was teaching the GMAT for now about 14 years, and I've had anybody from Olympic athletes to policemen, to military people, to artists, architects, engineers. Everybody's from different backgrounds. So we all have different subject matter expertise. So the GMAT can't really say, well, people who are successful in the business school must have a math background or a science background. That's not always the case. So they can't really test any subject matter expertise. And that's what they're very clear about, is they might give you a passage on molecular biology, astronomy, or archaeology. You don't need to know anything about these subject matter topics. You do need to, though, possess these, what the GMAT calls higher order reasoning skills, right? The skills are important. In fact, if you ever applied for a job, unless it's a very technical job, you probably remember that there was a section called skills, and you need to have communication skills, decision-making skills, time management skills, right? Organizational skills. And usually there isn't a section that's called knowledge skills or like knowledge, right? Unless, again, it's very technical. So this means that the way that you prepare for the test is going to be mostly skills development. You need to have some basic knowledge of some basic concepts. On the current version of the GMAT is geometry, algebra, statistics, as well as the English language, but ultimately it's going to come down to developing the skill. This is not how most of us have learned, because most of us in our traditional educational system, we were told that knowledge is power. That was true in the 20th century, and certainly in the 19th century when our educational system was designed. But it is no longer true because now we have Google and ChatGPT. If you want to know something, all you have to do is just ask. And the system is going to tell you immediately at the split of a second. Now we have 5G plus. So you're literally in a faster than you can think of this, you're going to know the answer. That is why this mantra, knowledge is power, is completely broken now. It's not going to work. Let me give you a ridiculous example. Let's say you want to learn how to swim. Do you think that reading a book on swimming would be enough to go and compete against Michael Phelps? We need the skill, right? We need to develop these skills and potentially invest some time and effort in order to be able to do what's expected of us. And that is why preparing for the GMAT is going to take more than a weekend. It's not really possible to cram for it. And if you've heard of people who prepared for a weekend, I've certainly met these people as well. I'm going to give you a very quick answer. These people just already had the skills. That's it. So they've probably done quite well in similar tests, and they just had to adapt their performance a little bit to this test. We're going to come back in just a few minutes to how do you actually prepare for the test. But I wanted to talk to you a little bit because I have a question here. When the GMAT exam format will be changed, when it's come to effect, and how is it actually changing? So I want to talk about this a little bit because I know some of you might be now deciding whether I should be doing the current version of the GMAT or whether maybe I should be waiting until the next year. So here's the current version of the GMAT. There are 4 sections, and one of them is commonly known as the essay, another one is commonly known as integrated reasoning, whatever that means. And then the 2 last ones are commonly known as math and English. And there's, again, a bit of a misconception because there's no such thing as math and English. In fact, this test, as you could see, evaluates your analytical skills and your reasoning skills. It's all about reasoning. The reasoning with numbers, quantitative reasoning, the reasoning without numbers, verbal reasoning, and the reasoning with a bunch of data, which is integrated reasoning. So all of this is really about the skills. Now, on a current version of the test, only the quantitative reasoning and the verbal reasoning sections contribute towards your total score, 200 to 800. And in the quantitative reasoning and the verbal reasoning sections, here are the types of the questions. You have problem-solving questions. These are the questions that we have already seen. And there are data sufficiency questions. This is actually the question I'm going to show you also in a few moments. Then we also have a verbal reasoning section. And on that section, we have 3 question types: sense correction, critical reasoning, the one that we've just seen, and reading comprehension, which deals with much longer passages. Today, we only have an hour. But if you are interested to dig in more into these, then we at the Admit Master also offer 2 hours math refresher and verbal refresher classes, so you can actually focus on one section at a time. And essentially, we are going to talk about what we talk about today, a little more expanded with more examples, and we're going to spend 4 hours in total talking about that. And of course, if you decide to come and join our class, it's actually close to 50 hours of training in class. If you haven't been to our refresher classes, please go to admitmaster.com. You'll find the link, and the next class is actually next Thursday. Here's something important to understand about the test. This is a very efficient test. In approximately 3 hours, it provides some statistics or some evidence to the business school of how well you compare to other candidates. And it does so using what's called the computer adaptive algorithm. That's why it's a very efficient test. It can very accurately assess where you stand compared to others because it's adapting. It doesn't give you a lot of questions that are too easy for you, and it doesn't challenge you with a lot of questions that are too hard. It will adapt the level so that it figures out exactly where you are by giving you questions that are approximately at your level. And it knows that by keeping track of how well you can answer the questions. So in a very simplified manner, and I can explain it this way, and it's really very simplified. It's a little more complicated than that. But on a very simple level, if you answer the question correctly, the next question will get harder. And if you answer the question incorrectly, the next question is going to get easier. Again, on a very simplistic level. So your objective would be to see harder questions by answering many questions correctly, and then answer these harder questions correctly as well, so that your score will keep climbing up. That's in essence how the test is working. You've probably heard that the test is actually getting shorter because the algorithm gets perfected and it gets more and more efficient. Currently, the exam's about 3 hours. It is going to be shorter. It's going to be only 2 hours and 15 minutes. The quantitative reasoning section is going to be shortened from 62 to 45 minutes. Instead of 31 questions, now you're going to have only 21. But all of these 21 questions are going to be problem-solving questions. Data sufficiency questions will get moved to another section. To me, that's a bit of a bad news because to me personally, data sufficiency questions take a lot less time because obviously you don't have to answer the question. You just have to figure out if you have enough information to answer it. I'll show this to you in a moment. Verbal reasoning questions, a verbal reasoning section also gets shorter from 65 to 45 minutes. So you're saving 20 minutes. Instead of 36 questions, you're going to have 23. And you're no longer going to have sentence correction questions, only critical reasoning and reading comprehension. Again, in terms of time management, this is a bit of a bad news because sentence correction questions normally, if you know what you're doing, take a lot shorter, especially if English is your first language and you're able to read very efficiently. And then there's a new section called data insights. So integrated reasoning section used to be half an hour. It becomes 45 minutes. Instead of 12 questions, now you have 20. And data sufficiency questions now get moved to this new data insights section. So the data insight is essentially the old integrated reasoning plus data sufficiency. And now you have a little bit less time per question, just a little over 2 minutes. On the old integrated reasoning, you had 2.5 minutes. You could take these sections in any order. There's going to be a 1 10-minute break. You can take either after the first section or after the second section. Certain topics and certain question types are removed, so no longer you're going to need to write an essay. Sentence correction questions are completely removed, and the entire topic of geometry gets removed as well. I will talk in a moment about when this is going to happen. So geometry used to be about 15% of the test. It's not a huge area of the test. Many of our students find geometry a little bit easier because it all has to do with visual math, so it's a little easier to visualize pictures. Again, the GMAT has decided to remove that to focus a little bit more on arithmetic and algebra and word problems. Another big thing that's changing about the test is the scores. The scoring scale will get changed. Instead of 200 to 800, the new scoring system is going to be 205 to 805. And when the GMAT was introduced, when the adaptive GMAT was introduced approximately 25 years ago, the score of 700 was the top 1%. If you've been following the percentile scales on the GMAT, then 700 is now 13th percentile, or 87th percentile rather, top 13%. So that creates a bit of a score inflation, and the scores get crowded on top. So what the GMAT has done is they've recalibrated their scoring algorithm. So they're now focusing, first of all, more on reasoning skills and less on math, because they want to remove that advantage from people who are really good in math, but maybe not necessarily really good at thinking logically. So that's why they are recalibrating the question. They're not just reshuffling the questions, and they're not just moving the questions around. They're also assigning different scales to different questions that could be solved using math, but the math is complicated. They are actually either removing these questions or they're making them carry less weight. Questions that are trickier in terms of the logic are now going to carry more weight. As a result, the bell curve system will also be changed, and the score of 705 now will be the 99th percentile. And the old score of 700 is now going to be approximately 635, 645. So going forward, it will be very difficult to get a score above 700. And of course, the business schools will know that as well. So they're not necessarily going to hold it against you to not getting a score of 700. But just so you know, if you really want a score of 700, just because there's this psychological level of getting 700, then it will be much more difficult to get that on the new test. Somebody was asking whether the business schools check the AWA section or just the score. Yes, they do. They will actually receive your AWA essay, and most of the business schools will be reading it, because again, they want to see what your communication skills are. So let's talk about when is this happening? Well, a good question. I'm glad you asked. So the official prep is available already. We already are working on adapting our course. So in our current version of the course, we are already teaching the new format as well as the old format. Because it's mostly the scoring algorithm and there's only one type of questions that gets introduced, and types of questions that get introduced. So most of the questions on the new version of the test are going to be the questions from the old data bank, but there is a completely new type of questions that didn't exist on the earlier version of the test. And these are data sufficiency questions that contain no math. Yeah, that's a little strange, right? So these are going to contain pure logic. They will be kind of like verbal questions, but structured as data sufficiency. These are brand new. There's going to be just only very few of them in the new version of the test, and we are going to start teaching that in our next version of the course. But the official prep is already available. You can go ahead and buy the official guide. We've received them, I think about a month ago. We usually get them from the publisher a little bit before it's introduced to the general public. You will be able to register for the new test, GMAT Focus, on August 29th this year. You'll be able to take the new test sometime in Q4. And according to the GMAT, it will be sometime in late Q4. I mean, obviously, there are many different logistical challenges that they have to overcome in order to introduce this new test. So sometime towards the end of the year, the old exam is going to end sometime in Q1 2024. As we were told at GMAT conference, the window of both exams offered at the same time is actually going to be very short. We originally thought it will be at least 3 to 6 months, but according to the GMAT, it will be just a few weeks. Now, you might be wondering, hey, is the exam getting easier? And yeah, let me give you my take on this. The test makers are not necessarily known for making the tests easier. And as more and more people fill out the test, they generally need to continue making the test a differentiating factor in the application. So generally, they would be making the test, let's say, more fair and that means less easy. So what does this mean for you? Well, that means that if you are planning to do, if you are planning to, if you've already been studying for the test, and maybe if you want that score of 700, what I would suggest that you actually try to take the test before the end of this year. Because the new test is going to be available sometime at the end of this year, many application deadlines, let's say if you want to apply to a full-time Rotman program for next year, and you want to apply early in order to secure that seat, you would probably want to make sure that you have your application in by the end of this year. And that would mean that you probably want to focus on the current version of the test, especially remembering that the scoring algorithm on the new test is now going to consider the data insight section as part of the total score. It is supposedly going to be more challenging to trick the test. So you are going to have to still invest some time in preparing for the test, get used to the new algorithm. So it might be best to try to take it for still this year. So if you're looking to take the GMAT by end of August to mid-September, you will still be writing the old exam. The new exam will be available only as of sometime in December. And of course, if you're just starting and maybe you hate sentence correction or geometry, then in that case, you could certainly wait until the next year and take the test then. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, what I would like to do is show you very quickly another question that is also quite reflective of what to expect. And then I'm going to talk for about 10 minutes or so how you can prepare for the test. So this is a data sufficiency question. This is a question from the official guide. So I'm going to ask you to please don't Google it while we're doing this question. And here's the question. It actually provides some sort of a context, and it asks a question. This is, in particular, this is a data sufficiency quantitative question. These are the questions that will appear on the current version of the test. And you have two statements. So after reading this question, after reading the passage and reading the question, you will need to understand what information is missing in order for me to be able to answer this question. And you have two pieces of information that's given to you by the GMAT, statement 1 and statement 2. Your job isn't to actually find what was the discounted price of the second shirt. Your job is to simply understand whether you can answer this question based on information in statement 1 or information in statement 2, or maybe you need both, maybe you either would be enough, or maybe none of this is sufficient. Here are the 5 answer choices. I'm going to give you about 45 seconds to try to understand, after reading this passage, well, do I need statement 1? Do I need statement 2 to answer this question? Do I need them both or neither? There you go. Once you think you know the answer, please put it in the chat box, and then we'll talk about this question. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I see some people for C, some people for E, some people are still working on this question. Now, yeah, I see a few more people for C. Now, this was an official question from the GMAT official guide. So yeah, I see most people are for C. So let me show you what the official explanation looks like. And here's something interesting. Many people, when they work on questions from the official guide, they are going to work out the question, and then they're going to read the back of the book, the explanation, just to make sure that what they've done was correct. right? That's how we've learned. And here's something interesting: is according to the GMAT, and I know personally people who write questions as well as manage the GMAT. The explanations are written from the mathematical perspective. So essentially, if we don't understand the math process of doing the question, the GMAT wants to explain it to us. What the GMAT doesn't disclose in the explanations to the official guide is the logic behind the question. This is more of a secret sauce of the questions. So that's why when I'm reading this, and I have a master's of mathematics, my stress level is going way up. I'm like, I have no idea how I can do this in 2 minutes, right? And ideally, I want to do these questions quicker than 2 minutes because I want to leave a little bit more time for harder questions. So let's think about it a little bit differently. We here at Admit Master call the set of skills that are tested on the GMAT the skills of thinking like a CEO. Because now, how many of you would like to become a CEO one day after graduating from a business school? This is the ultimate dream job, the ultimate decision maker who is making a lot of money, making decisions, right? So think about this. Imagine you're a CEO of this store. Let me ask you a question. How many of you would love to buy things at a regular price? You walk into a store and say, wow, you have shirts on regular price today. Let me go and buy one. None of us do. So if you want to increase your sales, one of the things you would probably want to do is create some sort of an incentive for your customers to buy shirts. Now, you don't want to lose the money when you're creating the incentive. So you're going to be very clever about this. You are actually going to say, I'm going to have a sale. If you buy the first shirt at the regular price, so we are going to make our profit on the first shirt, as an incentive, we are going to sell you the second shirt at a discount. Now, many stores will call this a BOGO, buy one, get one. And the way we're going to do it is the second shirt, we're actually going to sell it to you in such a way that we don't make any money on the second shirt. Like we basically just going to sell it at cost, right? So if we are supposed to make some profit from you from buying one shirt, we're going to still make that profit. And the second shirt is more like a gift. You cover our cost. Everybody's happy. We made the sale. We made our money. You bought things on sale. You're happy, but you bought two shirts, right? So that's how many of the kind of marketing strategies operate. But ultimately, it all comes down to this. We as a store make no profit on the second shirt. That means the second shirt is sold at cost. That means the discounted price of the second shirt is equal to the cost of the shirt to the store. So now let's see which of the statements will give us enough information. Statement number one gives us the regular price. Now it's great to have a regular price, but I don't know nothing about the discount. So how can I calculate the discounted price? So that by itself is definitely not enough. Now, many people are going to believe in order for me to see the discounted price, I need to have the regular price and something about the discount. But honestly, if I walk into a store and if I want to buy a shirt, if I know it's on the discount, do I really care about the regular price? Not really. I just want to know what's the discounted price. And I know it sounds a little strange, but this is how the GMAT likes to trick us. They never asked us for the regular price. They simply asked us what was the discounted price. We found it was the cost to the store. And the second statement provides exactly that. It just tells us the cost was $12. So guess what? The answer is actually B. Statement two on its own was sufficient. And we can answer it in 1 minute if we wear our thinking like a CEO hat. And thanks so much for putting the questions in the Q&A box. I'm just going to answer these questions real quick. The current version of the test, 2022, is the final version, so there's nothing newer. And are we preparing future candidates for the new GMAT test? Yes, we are. So in our courses now, we teach both the current version of the test as well as the new version of the test. Now, this is going to require some confidence building, right? And this is going to take some effort. So let me give you an example. Darini came to us at the start of the pandemic. She left her job. I don't remember whether she left herself or she was let go. It doesn't really matter. But she was at that point in her career where she said, look, I really need to do my MBA. She was approaching the upper end of the number of years of work experience for an MBA program. And she said, look, I would really need to do the MBA right now. Otherwise, I'm never going to do it. And the story was that she tried to study for the GMAT for about 4 or 5 years. And she just couldn't find a way to do that. She developed so much anxiety about the test that even seeing questions was raising her stress level. And let's be honest, we're human beings, we're not machines. So stress is very real when it comes to the test. That's why a lot of the things we do in our class is to help you de-stress that test and show you the strategies that are going to help you even answer these questions under stress, help you develop certain habits that are going to help you do that. She was actually able to achieve a score of 700 in just 3 months. She was from Europe, so she went back to Europe doing her MBA, and she now lives in Europe. She worked for the United Nations. So, ladies and gentlemen, even if you tried studying for the test and you weren't successful so far, please don't give up. It is absolutely possible. I will show you exactly how in a moment. Whether you come and study with us or whether for some reasons you can't, I'm going to give you the structure over the next 10 minutes or so you know exactly what to follow. Syed's asking, where can I buy the official GMAT guide? Well, if you would like to buy a soft copy, an ebook, you could buy it from us. It's relatively inexpensive compared to what you're going to see on Amazon. We are official distributor of the ebooks. However, if you would like to buy a paper copy, you could buy it from your favorite bookstore or from Amazon. Now, how do you prepare for the test? This is a very important question. So let's spend the next 10 minutes talking about that. There are many different resources how you can prepare for the test. And when I prepared for my own test, which was in early 2000s, here's how my test prep worked. At that time, not a lot of resources were available, right? You know, I'm a lot older than I look. Well, not really. I've done my MBA when I was 7 years old. So that's why I look so young. But I've actually done my MBA 20 years ago. So here's how my test prep worked. I started doing some research and I realized, geez, I have to do the GMAT. The score scale was 200 to 800. I had no idea where I stand. So the first step that I did is I actually took a practice test. My first practice score was 650. What I would suggest is that you also take a practice test. Don't worry too much about studying. Just take the test and get an assessment of your current level. Remember, this is not a knowledge-based test. This is a test of a skill. So you have a certain skill set. I've seen people getting anywhere from 200 to 760 on the very first practice test. So you want to know where you stand. This is where I was at 650. And then I realized, I would have liked to get a higher score. So what was missing? And for me, what was missing was the English terminology. I was educated in a different language. English is my third language. So I didn't know what's an isosceles triangle. And when I saw that term on the exam, on my practice test, I have no idea what that is. So it took me a few days to actually review these terms. I took the next practice test. I got 700 on the next practice test. And then I went ahead and booked my real test. It was a little easier to do it then at a test center. Now it's actually very easy because you could do the exam at home. And the whole process took me about 2 weeks. And I got a score of 750. And I'm telling this to you not to impress you. It impresses me. Honestly, I think it's really cool. And I walked out of a test center and I was told, wow, you are the first person who did this test and got 750 in the past months. I'm like, wow, I guess that's very impressive. So you might be wondering, Sergey is probably a genius. Let me bust a bit of a GMAT myth. I'm not necessarily any smarter than other people. For me, the reason why I did so well so quickly is it took me actually years to learn these strategies. Somebody was asking, where can you take a practice test? Well, let me type a quick website here for you in the chat. This is where you can take a completely free practice test. And after you do, if you'd like for me to review your results, let me know. This is a software to which we have access to, so I can take a look at how you did, not just to the score, but to actually your performance all throughout the test. And I can give you some feedback and suggestions. So, it took me many years to learn this strategy. I'll show you how. And I've been teaching the GMAT for 14 years now. So, and I'm still learning, right? Somebody who tells me, well, I can teach the GMAT after 2 weeks. Good luck. I've met people who've been teaching the GMAT. One of our instructors started teaching the GMAT in 1997. He still teaches our classes, right? So he is a little before some of you were born. Let's just put it this way. So the reason why I did so well so quickly is I got really lucky in school. I had amazing teachers. This was my math teacher. He was just so gifted as a teacher. I owe a lot to him. And that's why I love my job. I had a corporate career after I graduated from an MBA program. And at some point, I decided I actually love teaching, and I became a GMAT instructor. I teach other tests as well, such as GRE, the LSAT. We also do different skills-based events for the little children. We teach them logic and reasoning skills. We have a center in Midtown Toronto where we do summer camps and things like that. So I'm actually really passionate about my work, in case you haven't figured so far. And this is actually my picture at the GMAT headquarters last week. So I love what I do. And most importantly, I'm very proud of our students. This was our student also a couple years ago, just at the start of the pandemic. She did a 380 on a diagnostic test and was very discouraged. She wanted to apply for a Master of Finance program and a Master of Financial Analysis. And it's a very challenging program academically. So she had to score very highly on the GMAT. So she just said, what do I need to do? And in about 3 months, she was able to get a score of 700. And I love what she said here. And it's really, I think it's really important that she said, throughout the course, I learned how to think like a CEO. I learned how to think outside the box. I learned how to manage my time and stress. She didn't say, I learned a bunch of formulas. That's important. But I have a Master of Math. I'm going to be the first person to tell you to try to use as little math as possible and to use more of your logic. And you can learn the logic, you can learn the different patterns of the test, you can learn how to beat the test. I've had people, recently we worked with a few candidates who were so bad in math. In approximately 2 months, they were able to get from score somewhere in the 200 to above 600 and get into an MBA program. So the question then, well, okay, so how do I do this? That's a great question. I'm glad you asked. So here's how we can do this. Now, some people just go and buy books. And the books are okay as long as you remember these are question banks. These are not books that actually teach you how to do that. And even though there are some books that actually contain strategies, remember these books are written by test prep organizations that want you to read the book, understand it's very hard, and come to a course. I mean, that's just the reality. I work in the industry, so I'll give you a little bit of a secret, right? So we might need to do something a little bit different. Here's a graph that was shared with us last week at the GMAT conference. Every year, there are close to 10 million people who would like to do a graduate management degree, such as a master or an MBA. 10 million people worldwide. Of these 10 million people, about 2 million people will actually say, look, I should do the GMAT. They either buy a book or download the practice test. And of these 2 million people, only about 125,000 people take the real test every year. And of them, only about 16,000 will actually get a score above 700. So if you and I just meet for coffee and just say, look, I'd really love to do an MBA, the chance of us to actually get a score of 700 is about 1 in 600. I haven't checked the chances of winning a lottery, but it's not necessarily the best chance, right? So how can we improve our chance? Let me give you the strategy. It's going to be the final thing I'm going to talk about today. We need to recognize that this test is going to require fundamentally different ways to prepare. And I love analogies because that's how we understand things better. So I'm going to use an analogy of driving a car. Here's how we are going to be mastering this skill. And I'm sure that you kind of probably understand that if you want to drive a car, especially like maybe a sports car on a racetrack, it's not going to be enough to just read a book. But reading a book is important. You have to know the rules. So step number 1 is you need to make sure you're comfortable with the basics. And if you come to our class, we are actually here at Admit Master, we are actually going to give you everything you need, including the review material. So you don't have to go and buy any books or any prep materials. You don't have to go back to high school. We're going to give you a bunch of exercises you're going to do before you come to the class to make sure you're comfortable adding fractions, solving little linear equations, recognizing what's a subject, what's a verb in a sentence, and so on. So that was step one, knowing the rules. Step two is you actually have to learn how to drive, how to do the questions. That is going to be going beyond simply knowing the rules, right? And I think we kind of know, just because I know that green means go doesn't necessarily mean I can drive. So I need to learn these strategies. And what's really important, that's why we all went to a driving school, was that we learned these strategies before we got into trouble, right? It was important to learn these best strategies up front because there's a big opportunity cost of you delaying your MBA or not doing your MBA. If you looked at some statistics, people with an MBA degree will make over the course of their career anywhere from about $3 to $8 million over what they would with just a bachelor's degree. Certainly for me, it was a huge change in my career. As soon as I did my MBA, I was immediately making 200% more money, so 3 times more, as soon as I graduated compared to what I was making before. Now, for some of you, it might not be as dramatic, but MBA is a life-changing experience. So you want to make sure that you don't squander this chance. And that's why you want to make sure that you give yourself the best chance of succeeding on the GMAT, because that will lead not just to your dream business school, but also to some potentially entrance scholarships and better opportunities for recruitment, because many top companies such as consulting firms, investment banks, and so on, they will actually ask you what was your GMAT score. So you want to make sure you learn these strategies. You also want to make sure you try them. It's not enough to just watch somebody on YouTube do the questions and then show up for the test. You have to do it. It's kind of like watching somebody drive a Uber and then trying to do it yourself. It's not going to work. You have to do it yourself. And what's also important, and that's why a lot of people prefer, for example, to come and study in a group, is to get feedback. When you study in a small group, that's really the best way to learn, because you're there with an instructor who's guiding you, and you're also there with other people. We just had a student recently. He was studying for about 2 years, and the maximum score he was able to get was 670. And finally, I convinced him, I said, just come to the class. So he came to the class, and at the end of the class, he said, Sergey, I just wanted to shake your hand. And I just want to tell you, you know what, the best part about this class was being here with other people. I didn't even realize how important it is to bounce the ideas. And I've learned probably as much from other people as I did from the instructor. And in a matter of 1 month, he was able to get a score of 740. Just happened recently back in May. So it's important to be in that community. It's important to learn these strategies. It's important to get that feedback. And it's important to practice. Practice is going to be really, really important. And ladies and gentlemen, I want you to not make a mistake that practice makes perfect. It doesn't necessarily do. Practice makes a habit. Please remember that. Write it down if you'd like. When you practice something, that becomes your habit. For example, when you come to a class, we're going to teach you certain specific approaches to the questions. And we're going to drill it into you so that when you are doing the question, you're going to know that the first step is going to be doing this and not that. And that's going to help you be so comfortable with the process. When I'm doing the question right now, you're going to see me do things very differently from most other people do. Most other people, for example, write a bunch of formulas and 5 minutes later, they're still working on the question. I get to think and analyze the question, look for some patterns, and usually in a minute, I know the answer without doing too much math. So it's just a different habit. And why it's very important to develop these habits is that on the day of the test, you will be stressed out. No matter what you do, you will be stressed out. It is a stressful experience, and it's a high-stake experience. A lot of your future career will depend on how well you do. So what most people do is when they're stressed out, they go back to their habits. They default to the habits. So that's why it's important to have the proper habits. And there's a question from Irina here, whether you can take the class in person. So let me actually tell you, if you were to take the class, how would this work? So we offer very advanced classes. If you do some comparison with some of the other test prep organizations, we've been around for over 20 years. I took over this company back in 2012, but this company existed for 14 years before that, ever since 1998, even though I wasn't a part of it. and had a different name. So we offer very advanced classes. We are still a private company based in Canada. We care a lot about our students, the success of our students. We do a lot of work with business schools, different partners, organizations, work with corporate clients such as Deloitte, with different consulting firms, banks. And we also get a lot of our clients from referrals. So for us, it's really important when you come to us that you are successful. That's why when you come to us, we offer what we call an all-inclusive program, which means we want to make sure you have access to all the right resources and all the best coaching. So you'll be in a fairly small class. The class is going to be interactive. If you're in Toronto, this class will be in person. If you are not in Toronto, you could take this class in a live virtual format. But the live virtual format, we worked very hard to make this as close as possible to the real thing. So you'll be able to interact with people in the class. We have several cameras installed. We have about 5 TVs installed. So the instructor sees you, you see the instructor, you see other people in the class, you participate in the discussion. So it's going to be an amazing experience, as close as it will get to being there in person without commuting to Toronto and taking a plane. We had some people actually before the pandemic flying into every weekend, not quite from Vancouver, but from as far as Ottawa and Quebec City to join our classes. But now you don't need to do this. It's a hybrid class. The important thing is we are going to coach you until you are successful. And that's very, very important, right? We're not going to just throw you out as soon as you're done. And I know some companies do that. You're going to have access to recordings of the classes for a year. You can come back and retake the class completely free for a year. We're going to coach you for a year. We always want WhatsApp. We communicate with our students all the time. We keep track of what you're doing online. We are always in communication. We work 7 days a week. You'll be really amazed how much of the support you're getting. And we're quite proactive, right? So we'll leave you messages on WhatsApp. You're part of a group. We have office hours every week. You have some tutoring sessions included. So essentially, we want to make sure you succeed as long as you want to succeed and as long as you put in the effort. Our next class starts on July 8th. There's going to be a weekend class. And our following class on evenings is going to be in August. And if you go to admitmaster.com/offer, you will be able to see what is available. Now we do offer, let me just finish here real quick. We do offer self-study options as well. You could see everything on admitmaster.com/offer. And we do keep track of success of our students. Everybody who takes our GMAT mastery program generally tends to improve 200 points and up compared to where they started. That's about an average. We have had people improve over 400 points. I had somebody improve over 500 points. Somebody who started from 200 ended up with 730. This was, I think, the highest improvement I've ever seen. It was 530 points. When I tell this to some people, they're like, this is impossible. And about a third of our students achieve scores of 700 or more. I think that's very impressive. I like to say that we have the best students in the world, but the reality is also that we want to make sure you have fun in the class. And we also want to make sure that we adapt your program to however long you need to and however much time you can spend. Let me give you just a couple of quick examples and then we'll wrap for today. Fionn studied for GMAT with us for about 9 months. She started from score somewhere in the 400s. She was a nurse. During the pandemic, she was working 4 different jobs, night shifts. She worked in the emergency room. As you can only imagine, crazy work schedule, but she was still able to get a top score of 760 in about 9 months, spending very little time on the GMAT, but she was committed, dedicated, and she continued studying. Here's another person, Brian. He actually was between the jobs. And he said, look, guys, I'm starting my new job at Google in 2 months. I need a really high score. My diagnostic was 570, and literally he was the person who probably was the the person who took the test the soonest after the course. It was 4 days after the end of the course, and he was able to get 760 on the first attempt. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to invite you to think what's really important for you. And if it's really important for you to take your career to the next level, if you think you have what it takes to be a future leader, then please get in touch with us. Please get in touch with the Rotman's admissions office. Please get a profile assessment. Please start that discussion. We are here to help. And honestly, I'm really good at what I do, and I don't want to be too humble. But I'm good at what I do. I love my job. I get paid well for what I do. But honestly, if I win $1 billion, I would still do what I do right now. So I love to help, and I'd love to connect with you and have a free consultation if you'd like, and help you any way I can. So if you are the kind of person who says, look, I need a high scorer, then please come and join us in our live class. If you're still exploring, take a practice test, try gmat.com, attend our refresher classes, and you could go to all of this at admitmaster.com/offer. We will give you a chance to win a free course. So please go to this link in about an hour or so. We are actually going to specifically for you post the link so that you can actually be able to win a free course. And we will follow up with you by email as well.
Great. I am just wanting to thank Sergey so much for his time here today. I know I learned a lot about the GMAT. I hope you did too. As he mentioned, please feel free to reach out to them if you're looking for some GMAT support. As I mentioned at the beginning of this session, I am hosting a How to Ace Your Application webinar tomorrow at noon. And next week we are hosting an engineering panel on Wednesday, which is going to be amazing. So thanks to everybody. I will be sending out a recording of this session to everybody who attended and anyone who registered. Thank you again for joining us, and have a really great rest of your Wednesday. Take care, everybody.
Thank you so much. Thanks again for hosting me. It's been my pleasure. Somebody asked a question: how long is the GMAT? Are the GMAT results valid for? Just like Angela said, it is valid for 5 years, and our subject material, our recordings are available outside of the hours. Yes, definitely, you're going to have the recording as well. Thank you so much. Really appreciate everyone. It's been a pleasure spending some time with you, Angela. Thank you so much for having me here today. I believe we're going to do another class next Friday. So if you know of any friends who missed this and you feel that they will benefit, please make sure that you go to the Rotman website. And I'm sure that we can probably share a link, correct?
Absolutely, we'll do that.
Okay, let's share a link to the next one, and please have your friends join us as well. Thanks so much, and have everyone have an amazing long weekend and a Canada Day or Independence Day if you're celebrating.
Take care, everyone. Bye now.
Thank you. Take care.